Guys, I made a trip on Super Bowl Sunday to Whole Foods where all the Carolina graduates tend to buy their groceries. And I was looking in the dairy section and on the side of a milk cart, and I saw the picture of Ian Jackson. Where the heck has Ian Jackson went over the last 2 weeks? 3 weeks ago, he was looking to be, potentially a first round draft pick in the 2025 NBA draft. Now he's just vanished. And that's one of the mysteries about this Carolina team. You see so much potential and so much talent, perhaps unrealized talent, inconsistent talent. But where has Jackson gone?
It's hard to know. This is a continuation of a theme under Hubert Davis in his 4-year tenure in Chapel Hill. Because remember, 2 years ago, when the Tar Heels infamously missed the NCAA tournament entirely after being the preseason #1 team in the rankings, something that had never happened in the modern history to any school of college basketball. The main reason they missed it 2 years ago was that they never figured out their backcourt chemistry. Individually, Caleb Love and RJ Davis were outstanding players. Together, they did not make a good match. They did not make each other better. They did not help the Tar Heels' offensive efficiency. And we were left scratching our heads because it never came together. And then the Heels are, turning down a bid to the NIT after you see a team that certainly had enough talent 2 years ago to make the NCAA tournament, and they didn't. Well, here we are 2 years later, and it's the same fundamental question. Different people, but the same fundamental question. Hubert Davis is not only a former Carolina player, he's a former Carolina guard under Dean Smith. You'd think he would have an even better window into this world. His job includes making the pieces fit together offensively and defensively. And as we've said all year long, Hubert Davis's maybe biggest problem is roster construction. They missed all those big guys in the transfer portal. Carolina is without a true quality big man literally for the first time in 6 decades. They're not going to have a single big man average 10 points per game. I've done the research. That has not happened since the 1960s or even earlier. So it's different in terms of construction, but it's too late to solve that problem mid-season. It's never too late to solve chemistry issues, and that's his challenge. When you add together second-year starter Elliot Cadeau at point guard, fifth-year senior and last year's National Player of the Year RJ Davis, together with Ian Jackson and Seth Trimble, a 6'3" guy who might lead the Tar Heels in rebounding for the season. That's never, again, the Heels have never been led by a 6'3" guy in rebounding for a season. These are weird times at Chapel Hill. But those four guys are good enough that if their chemistry is right, they're not just an NCAA tournament team, they're a dangerous NCAA tournament team. The chemistry is not right. I don't have a great answer for the why part of your question, Mike. That to me is a partially an X and O issue. And the Tar Heels have a bunch of guards who love to pound that dribble into the floor. And if you watched Clemson beat Duke, they were playing with three guards much of that game. They moved the ball a lot. And there was a purpose beyond the dribble. And there was a purpose beyond the passes. And it was part of a pretty fluid Clemson offense. The Tar Heels don't play fluid offense with this particular group of skill sets. And it's, as we've mentioned on previous shows, even the body language toward each other. You hesitate to read too much into that. But the Tar Heels look like they're always having fun. I mean, you're playing college basketball at the University of North Carolina, and sometimes they look like they're having fun, but overall, probably not as much as some other Carolina teams. They look more to me like the weird chemistry Carolina team again of 2 years ago, where despite the presence of Baycott and Love and Davis and others, they couldn't make the NCAA tournament. If they don't figure out the backcourt chemistry issue, they're going to miss the NCAA tournament again. And if they do somehow find a way for Ian Jackson to be good on the same night that RJ Davis is good, and RJ's played better lately, and Elliot Cadeau is good, and Seth Trimble is good, the same question you just asked about Ian Jackson, we could have asked about RJ Davis at the beginning of the season, and we could have asked about Seth Trimble after his mid-season looks like an all-ACC player explosion, and he just crashed back to earth and looked like a completely different player coming back from his injury. And Elliot Cadeau has had his moments. So the same question we're talking about with Ian Jackson right now could be asked about any of those four Carolina guards. It's almost like passing around a bug of some sort, an illness in the locker room. They have passed around this black cloud that seems to be hovering over one or more of their heads at any time in that Carolina backcourt. And they don't have enough of a deep roster to overcome those sorts of issues, and they're running out of time to figure them out.
Harry, you've been in the locker room. You've had to put together those type of chemistry equations to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Were you surprised that coming off of a week without a midweek game, that the Tar Heels weren't more coherent, especially Ian Jackson?
You think that time at this part of the season would really help heal some wounds. And when you're looking at Jackson, they're 2-4 in their last 6 games, and they're actually 2 possessions away from being 0-6. But when you parallel that with Jackson, Mike and Dave, 6, 7, 8, 9 points in no particular order of the losses. In the wins, 19 versus BC, 0 against Pitt. So they're 2-4, and he's got 59 points. Take out the 19, he's got 40 in the last 5. This is a guy in the beginning of the season we were putting as one of the 5 best players in the ACC in our early ACC voting, right? So let me take the pessimist side of this now. Have the optimistic side as a Tar Heel wannabe. Let's go to the pessimistic side. Things aren't looking great when you're 2-4 in your last 6 and could really be 0-6 if not for 2 possessions and 2 balls go through the basket at the end of the clock. This is something that also you can look to that. David mentioned Duke playing Illinois, and I went through it because I wasn't aware of that. Illinois has 3 players on their roster that are projected to go in the NBA draft. At this point, they all likelihood would. And I bring that up because Ian Jackson is still projected to go in the NBA draft, as you mentioned, Michael. There's 2 things that happen in February, and I use high school kids, when they play in a high school season, although they do play year-round in AAU, their actual season is kind of coming to an end in the middle of February. Physically, mentally, they're kind of in that mode where they're ready to move on to the AAU season. It's actually can become a phenomenon when you have successful high school, and then all of a sudden February hits, and all the AAU guys are calling you. Who are you going to play with? Where are you going to go? We're going to travel. And right away, as soon as it's over, right into AAU season. So there's a mentality that's built into these kids and talented kids like Jackson for years that inevitably happens around this time of year. The difference is now it's the agents and the Instagram DMs and I'm not saying that's the reason, but it definitely is out there, and it's out there more now than it ever has been before. I remember when NBADraft.net first came out, all the coaches wanted to shoot that thing to the sun because, it was the first, viral ability for the outside world to infiltrate that you couldn't control. You couldn't stop kids from seeing that, and kids inevitably see. And now with all the things that come with that, in all likelihood, Ian Jackson's probably going to go to the NBA next year. You can't turn down first-round money right now. You got to start your clock to get to your second contract. When you're that talented, as we talked before, the NBA guys think they can fix any ills that you may have. As it relates to Hubert and the staff right now, I think the task at hand is, as we talked about, maybe where this schedule lines up for them to get to the postseason, is to sit Ian Jackson down and say that there will be some value at the NBA level from the right front office for you helping us overcome these obstacles, help us get to the postseason, and then actually perform on a postseason level that may elevate your status. You just kind of have to accept it. And I'm just totally making this up, completely hypothetical, but potentially realistic in that if that's the problem, if his eyes are starting to wander out of Chapel Hill, that you may want to bring him back in to help him focus more on what's going to happen in Chapel Hill. The one thing you can do as a coach, in my mind, in this day and age with those type of kids, is just accept the reality that you're a pit stop for them and try to get the most out of them for your team that you possibly can. They had success with that early on, and just by virtue of the numbers, maybe there's some parallels that they're not playing as well as they should by virtue that Ian Jackson's not. So figure out a way to integrate that with what's happening now with RJ, with Cadeau, with whatever bigs are going to step up. And I know Lubin had 17 points in the game. Maybe he's a revelation that we can get some points out of him. but they're going to need Ian Jackson to be successful in his own right to make this run. And that time, you would think, Michael, would help them. And I think tonight looms large and could bode well for the Tar Heels if not only they come out with a road win, but they somehow get Jackson back on track to be a big part of that. Because when he is a big part of that, it can really unleash the rest of the roster.
Mike, real quick postscript on that. Hubert Davis has told the story numerous times this year that Ian Jackson, even as this highly touted prep All-American from New York City, texts him almost every day with the question, how can I get better? And what coach wouldn't want that in any player, star player, walk-on, or in between, right? I think Hubert's answer in recent weeks, one of them, I'm sure there's 1,000 things, Coach Keating, hey, it could be how to hedge a high ball screen, right? I mean, who knows how many things you could say, or the positioning of your elbow on your three-point shot. I mean, there's so many things, but one of them could be just a human reaction. How can you make yourself better as a player? Be where your feet are. Don't think about the NBA. Figure out a way to endear yourself as the young man with fifth-year senior R.J. Davis. Humble yourself if that's what it takes in that locker room. Hubert Davis himself is a profoundly, to his core, humble human being. He really is. Again, I've known him since the late 80s. He's hung around in the NBA as a player for a long time, successful broadcaster, successful assistant coach. He's led an amazing life despite these ups and downs as a head coach in a relatively brief time. He's a fundamentally humble man. And just like Hubert Davis, one of the most accurate three-point shooters in history, can help any of these dudes, including Ian Jackson, with their three-point shots, I think he can help with that psychological element, maybe including with his response to the text of the day. How can I become better today, coach? Well, here's one way beyond, that the court itself, the X's and O's themselves. And that's, I'm not placing blame. I don't know who's causing the chemistry problems, and we've all been human beings long enough to know that there's not always a bad guy when there's chemistry problems. Sometimes pieces just don't fit together, but it's Hubert Davis's job to make those backcourt pieces fit better.
This is the moment we waited for. Everything you want is right here. We gon' give them what they came for. We gon' take it up from last year. Shoot on my shot, boy, I'm long range. Me and the team on the same thing. Stayed down, never switched up. Only thing changed was the game. I'm in the zone now. Nothing can change what we on now. When I pull